Shalom and welcome to our People Who Make a Difference interview segment on Israel Vision magazine. Our guests today are a very special husband and wife team, Michael and Felice Fridson, who are founders of the Media Line news agency, an American media organization with a bureau in Jerusalem. Felice, who holds a degree in communications, along with her husband Michael, founded the Media Line and more recently the Middle East Press Club, bringing Israeli and Palestinian journalists together on a professional and personal basis. Michael, who's the Director of Media Services, holds a degree in political science, public administration, and law, and is a dynamic public speaker, prolific writer, and seasoned broadcast personality. He appears on Media Line's daily and weekly radio program, along with Felice, reaching 400 radio stations in the United States. He's also a regular commentator on the world's leading networks and affiliates, such as BBC, USA Radio, ABC, and the CBS networks. The Fridsons have 3 fine sons, 2 of whom have just finished serving in the Israeli army. And it's a special honor and joy to have both of you here today with us as our guests. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
God bless you. You folks have been a real encouragement to us. Why? Because you left America a few years ago to come here to start the Media Line. You had a very prosperous life there, and yet you came here. How did that happen?
Our children. It was an ultimatum. They weren't subtle about it. They said, Mom and Dad, we've been talking, and we're going. It's time we went. We should have been there already. We're not waiting. We'd like to keep the family together, but that's optional. And join us. And we did.
That's amazing. And it wasn't easy, but after being here so many years, they've acclimated, and as you said, 2 of them have gone through the army, and they're American and Israeli.
That's right.
They're called, what we say, a third culture kid. They're not American totally, they're not Israeli totally, there's something in between.
And it is fascinating. You know, people don't really understand how that works. Get a lot of questions about it. People want to know. You can't put your finger on why it happens, but when you're an American, you don't lose that. It stays with you forever. It doesn't diminish in any way. And yet, the Israeli side of it is something that's a source of pride, and it's a source of such intense feelings.
Well, it's almost the spiritual aspect of your person.
Tremendously, tremendously.
Now tell us a little bit about your Media Line organization. I know our viewers would be interested to know what that is all about.
Well, the Media Line is a nonprofit news agency who is based here in Jerusalem, distributing and producing from here in radio, television, and the written word, so that a lot of the local affiliates around the world will come to us for content and context. Because what we have found is that there's a lack of context of many stories in the region, and in order to understand the Middle East, the Israeli, the Palestinian, as well as the Arab media, and the world at large, you've got to really put it all into perspective.
Now, amen, that's for sure. Because so many times journalists come here and they're only here like for 1 year, 2 years, maybe 3, and they're so busy obeying headquarters and getting the story they want, the hot story and all the violence, that they don't get a chance really themselves to get to the context, to get to the real perspective.
Well, that's the key word. The Middle East, Israel, in particular the Palestinian Authority, the most overreported and understood area in the world. Yeah, exactly. And as you put it,
say that one more time.
Overreported and understood. Reporters come in 2 forms here. You have the ones you just described who are serving the natural length tour of duty of whatever organization they work for, usually up to 3 years. And then we have what are called parachutists. When things get hot here, suddenly, out of the blue, networks send their high-profile people who have no knowledge or experience with the Middle East, but they're the ones that they believe bring the viewers, so they're suddenly here. They're standing in front of camera, they're talking about things they don't know how to pronounce or what the context is, and it may look great, it may even help ratings, but it doesn't help the American understand what really it's all about. So that's why Felice said we focus on context. Context is far and above the most important thing. Not only context within the local sense, but in terms of how it affects the viewer wherever they are.
Yes.
North America, Europe, anywhere.
Why is it that Israel seems to always get kind of looks bad in the world media? I know there are colleagues, and I'm not speaking against these journalists that do this, but so many times Israel seems to end up looking like the aggressor and the one that's to blame for all the problems over here. Why is that?
Well, it's a complicated question. First of all, sometimes it's the viewer that's also looking at the story and trying to pick out the story that is damaging to Israel. It's not just the fact that the story is always a bad story. So you have to really differentiate between the bad story that is supposedly biased or against Israel, as opposed to the story that might not give a total picture or all perspectives, as I said prior.
Well, the Israeli government likes to say that it's a function of democracy, that as a democracy there's a price to pay, and part of that price is that they're always looking bad. I don't 100% subscribe to that. I think that it's more accurate to say that there is no such thing as equal coverage of non-equal entities. A sovereign nation has responsibilities that a non-sovereign, a non-governmental entity does not have. And because Israel is in the driver's seat, Israel is the sovereign of this area, far greater than the world gives them credit for, they have responsibilities, and with that there is a price to pay. And that's why the Israeli government is often criticized for taking steps that it views as protecting people, whether they're locals or parachutists, journalists, or anybody else, whereas the reason they're really doing it is they know very well that if something bad happens, they're blamed.
Israel gets an incredible amount of ink in the world, or coverage in the world today. I mean, you think of all the nations around the world, it seems like every day there's something about Israel happening in the world press.
And there are many good stories. There are a lot of stories about technology and things that the world can learn here as far as what Israel can teach. But if you're looking at the greater region, there are great coexistence stories also. So it's not always all bad. It's a matter of understanding what's going on.
You have started something very interesting here called the Mideast Press Club. Now, how did that get started?
It took about a year to put together, and I think it was one of the toughest things that we were ever involved in.
Sure it was. Go ahead.
It came about as a result of a frustration of ours.
That's good.
We have an educational mandate. We study media here. We study things like bias. We study how different sides of the conflict are covered, the parodies and the anomalies. One of the things that struck us was that one of the casualties of this period of violence that began in September of 2000 was the fact that Israeli and Palestinian journalists were no longer acting like journalists. They were acting more like combatants. Even in a conflict zone, a journalist on one side should be able to pick up the phone and call the other side and say, hey, we just heard such and such, what do you know about this? Or we got to trace down a rumor, or we need a lead somewhere, or we need somebody to cover something for us.
In war?
Even in war times, there's a communication that is supposed to, in the best of worlds, transcend the conflict itself. Now, reaching the optimum is probably impossible in anything in the Middle East, but we thought we would take a shot. Being an American organization, we could be the honest broker. Being frustrated by the fact that some Arab Palestinian journalists wouldn't talk to us because we have a Western Jerusalem address, and their frustration in not being able to get in, it really cut both ways, and we thought we could do something about it. Well, as Felice said, it took a year, and it was a very difficult...
What did you do?
Well, what happened is the inaugural event took place at the American Colony Hotel. And it
Which is where most of the...
many of the journalists from around the world will gather there and very often share stories. And I think there was a comfort level there of being able to meet in a place that was amenable to all sides.
Yes.
Now, we had the head of Palestinian Broadcasting Television, Radwan Abu Ayash, speak, as well as Mati Shklar, who is the Director General of Israel's second channel. And they spoke about the challenge of covering each other's side of the story. So it was very introspective. And I think the dynamics were amazing. What came out of there was that people, of course, once they got through all of the angst on both sides, were able to see that they had colleagues there that they could try to build relationships with.
How long ago was that?
This was only about a week and a half ago that we had this.
Now what has been the follow-through? That's
We've
what I'm
spoken
interested
to
in.
about a third of the journalists already. And many of them have given us their insight of what they want to see happen. We're going to be building out workshops and, of course, bringing in key speakers. So it will be an ongoing press club that we hope will be able to last throughout any conflict.
We had the heads of Israeli and Palestinian television present. They had never met each other before. They came in, and within minutes they were talking about projects they could possibly do together. We had the editors of two different kinds of special interest magazines from both sides who didn't know each other.
Youth and women.
They're now talking to each other about joint projects. The Media Line is now the first non-Arab source that will be providing content into Palestinian television. That's an amazing achievement. And just the fact
What are you going to provide, if I may ask?
Well, we're going to go with it slowly and also see the needs from their side as well. We're trying to be sort of an honest broker. We're not trying to say, this is what we're going to throw at you. It's a matter of listening to what everybody's needs are and bringing the sides together.
Did anything come up about the inside world of the Palestinian Authority and their media, what they teach their own people, the propaganda against Israel, what they've taught children?
Minimally, because that was not the focus. We didn't want to get too political. Some things that have come out, and it's very interesting, as you know, is that many of the journalists in the Palestinian Authority not only belong to government, but are also journalists. That's problematic in the journalistic arena. And these are things that we have discussed and are beginning to understand those dynamics.
Mr. Abu Ayyash, who heads Palestinian Broadcasting Corporation, has been very candid about what he could do under the Arafat regime versus what's now happening under Abbas. And he's been very open about showing us specifics of what he used to have to cover, what was demanded of him, what Abbas has now at least said will happen. We don't know how much of that's been implemented yet. And a good test of that's going to be to see just what we produce, or what of that which we produce actually airs in the Palestinian areas.
Now, you are content providers for American radio and television. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, this is the overreported, understood region. Context is everything for us. What we want to do is take stories that are simply words that bounce off of listeners and viewers every day and try to put them in a context. We want to be able to show somebody living in a North American city that something that happens in the Middle East will affect them, if for no other reason, in terms of preparedness against terrorism. Something that an American, a Canadian can use in protecting their own family. Seeing how the interaction between governments, the comparing of notes, understanding the technologies, understanding even, Israel loves to brag about it, and I guess they have every right to, but you can't boot up a computer and go online without using about 90% of exclusive Israeli technology. So what better way is there to break down the angst and the negative barriers than just showing how, hey guys, we're already sharing, we're already doing this, so let's see the context in which we do it.
Felice, as we wrap up, do you have any final comments?
I just invite everybody to go to the website, themedialine.org, so that they too can be more informed. And we want to thank you very much for having us. It's really nice when two couples get together that are in media and share their thoughts in this part of the world. Thank you.
Well,
Thank
it's our
you for your
delight to
work.
have